Writers are artists in their own right. And if you're not willing to write your art and letting it die, then you'll never have a say in anything. So write like your life depended on it, but make sure that you do it with honor. Honor yourself and those layers of yourself that wish they had a voice once upon a time.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. Okay, everybody. So close your eyes for just a moment and think about the version of yourself that you've been hiding, the parts you've pushed down, the voice you've silenced, and the worthiness you've questioned. Now, imagine what would happen if you gave that shadow permission to speak. Today's guest didn't just imagine it, she built an entire life around it. Sayen Gates is a shadow life coach, a best-selling author, podcast coach, and spiritual guide who spent 8 years in the medical field before realizing that healing the body without healing the mind and spirit is only half the work. So today we're going to be talking about a bunch of works by her, especially Breaking the Silence, Voices of Survivors. So without further ado, let's learn a little bit more and dive into the world. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Dea. It's great to see you. Great to be here. How we doing?
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. Doing great. Really excited to talk about this today with you. I think that you have a lot of topics to discuss that people really need to hear these days. People, especially in terms of breaking the silence. A lot of us these days, we stay closed off from others, and we don't talk about the things that need to be said. So I think this is going to be a great conversation.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
glad to have it.
Yeah, definitely. But before we talk about the book itself, I think we should talk a little bit about you. I mean, you grew up in the Bible Belt of Columbia, South Carolina, and then here you are now, writing books and helping people every single day. So tell us a little about that. How did growing up in your environment shape your journey and your eventual path to shadow work? What exactly inspired that?
Okay, so I grew up, like I said, in the Bible Belt. So my mother was Baptist, my dad was Apostolic Holiness. So those are two different views of what God represented. So for me, I knew at a young age that I was not religious because I remember always driving with my cousin when it was time to go to church on Sunday, and we would blast rap and R&B and everything else. But when we knew we got up to the hill towards the church, we cut it off out of respect.
Uh,
And it's like I didn't like how we had to cut that off because of what religious saying, like that rap and R&B are evil, or that it's just not of holy grounds, but it was the world that I lived in at that time. So after that, and I moved out of my mom's place and I ended up going out on my own, I started to search for like what my life needed in meaning. So I had met a friend at the time who was a spiritual teacher, and he taught me a lot of things, and he helped me develop and realize that I'm not religious. I'm more spiritual than anything, because I still have God's love inside me, but I also have the love of knowing that people can thrive and do better. So Shadow Corner was born out of the wounds that I had as a child, and as a teen, and then as mid college persons, and all the steps and phases of my life. Shadow Corner, as a whole, or what I would like to call myself, I'm a shadow work coach or shadow life coach. I specialize in helping individuals deconstruct and reconstruct how they think of themselves and others. And my goal is to make the world aware again, not only of their strengths and weaknesses, but of bringing the authentic self to the forefront. And I know that sometimes we get so hung up on life that we start to forget pieces of ourselves from relationships, from the interactions we have at work. And I knew about those things because I had experienced it. I experienced racism at work. I experienced someone being classist at the same time saying that I should have had this education instead of that education. Another thing that I've experienced was people consistently telling me because I didn't have this, I wasn't good enough, or I wasn't allowed to do this because of whatever reason. And then I said, but why not? If I have the experience, that should be enough for you. And then I started to understand that I shouldn't give people the keys of validation. I should just take the keys and take the keys and toss them to the wind and just say, we're gonna go and ride this out, and wherever spirit takes me, that's where they take me. And to this day, Shadow Corner has been just that, helping others around the world, being able to not only express themselves but bring their authentic self to the forefront and not be afraid of showing who they are.
Well, that's really inspiring. I think that's so important that we have that, especially because you started this in 2020 at a time where people felt a little bit isolated, as I mentioned before in the podcast, right? Like we didn't have a safe place to share it, and you provided that for them. So that's amazing. And I think before we dive into breaking the silence, if you'd share a little bit more about the establishment of Shadow Corner. I mean, were there any struggles that you had to overcome to get where you are today with it, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I know the first one was the fact that around the time of 2020, I was taking care of my aunt who had stage 4 lung cancer.
Mm.
And during that time, I was either helping her or I was at work. I had to give up school in order to take care of her. And then on top of that, I had to deal with the fact of when she passed, of where to put these feelings. Because as a kid, you just sit here and you yell and scream and you thinking that, hey, bargaining with God, like, hey, if you let her live, I'll do whatever you want. Or hey, if you let her live, I'll do what you need me to do, but just please don't take this person. And then when they're taken anyway, you finding out that you don't have anybody to talk to, you don't have anybody to push that out, and you're trained in your family just to hold that in. It becomes like more of like an everyday suffering after a while. So when she passed, I made the room that she stayed in the place where I birthed my podcast. So, and I also noticed that like before all that happened, um, I used to give advice. You gave advice freely to my friends on like how they should handle certain situations, how they should get through stuff, because those are things that either I have experienced or what I've seen happen when someone does the opposite of what they should have done. So I was always the person that was very observant. So if I knew that if someone was to hypothetically say, if someone was to walk in on their person cheating, and
Mm.
then the first initial reaction to the public for those that have known what that's like is, well, beat that person's behind and then you beat the other person. And then I'm like, wait, what if you did it at a different perspective? What if you didn't? What would have happened?
Mhm.
So Shadow Corner was born on the possibilities of what would happen if we did something differently. So when I got to a point where I was like, okay, I'm tired of holding this stuff in. Maybe some people can learn from my mistakes or my problems that I had. I would voice it and see what happened. And then that's when Shadow Corner became birth. I told them everything in season 1.
Understood. I really like that perspective. I mean, kind of going against the grain a little bit and thinking, okay, what if we don't take that initial first reaction or first step we might want to take, but doing the opposite? I don't know. I mean, especially with that example of somebody cheating. I know I would want to, rush in there and beat him up. But okay, I like the idea. Like, give it some time, think about it. What else can be done? It's a good way to think about things. And perhaps this is a good segue into talking a little bit about breaking the silence because, from what I understand, this book is something that's, about people who have done things a little differently or survived things that other people's haven't. So, chat with us a little bit about that. I mean, it features your journey about worthiness being challenged.
Mhm.
Tell us a little bit about those and those stories in your chapter that, but without giving too much away, of course.
Okay. So I will give you one story where I talked about um I think it would have been the second part of that of the part of the chapter where I talked about how comparison was the main monster in this situation. So I worked for Domino's for a while, and my manager at the time, he had this idol boy where he would do every single thing right and he would do everything perfect, and he would say sometimes, he's like, you guys should be just like so and so because he does this and he does that. But I knew that by doing those comparisons, you're stifling the person's uniqueness. So it's like when I left that job, I end up finding out when I got to another job that the same thing happens. So this is the part where I say God doesn't stop handing out pop quizzes just because you moved a different location. He just puts the quiz in a different perspective. So, in that one, I was talking about how I didn't want to be a carbon copy of someone else's or their favorite. I just wanted to be me. And I was wishing that everybody would just accept the fact that the goofy, nerdy girl is going to start breaking down walls and differently. I could connect with certain patients than another person could. So,
Under
yeah. So it's like I had to build build that type of rapport with not only the patients but also with my coworkers. I was like, I can't be what you want me to be. I have to be myself.
Right. Yeah, of course. And being that these are a couple different pieces that you included there, perspectives on cancer and breaking the silence, they're both about worthiness. But I think when you put it together, you must have grown as both a writer and a healer throughout that process. I mean, kind of like going from one mindset to the other. Would you agree that perhaps you learned a little bit from that process of getting it down on the page?
Yeah, and this is something that I want to just shout out for anybody that's thinking about writing or they are having a tough trouble on writing. When I wrote my chapter in the perspectives on cancer, I was writing from a place of grief and love
Mm.
because this was a person that I cared about most, and I was like, I felt like that they left me to be that, well, correction, I felt like they left me in order to be at their happiest life, or I felt like I was cheated by God to get what he wanted, but he didn't grant me what I needed. So the difference in mindset from that to this book with breaking in the silence, I was reclaiming who I was, reclaiming what those people told me that I was not, um what i what I was learning what boundaries were, and then understanding about meeting people where they were. Two different mindsets. And as a writer, you have to, in in all cases, think about and sit in the, excuse my French, the shit that is wherever you are at this moment. Some people do it when they're journaling. So think about it like you're in that same body of the person that you're writing about. So, and then think about, like, how do they feel? What is something that you wished was expressed then that you can now express? And then take that as a way of channeling the essence of where you're trying to go. For both times, I channeled Sayen in grief and love, and then Sayen in growth and love. I
Under
had to be able to do the two because I wouldn't have been able to write them.
Right. Yeah. So I guess in that way, like you have to have a good sense of self, right? Like a sense of like who you are in one moment versus another, and being able to go from shift from one to the other too when writing both pieces. So I guess as a writer, it's a great exercise to bond with who you are internally while also expressing that on the page and helping others to learn from it. So amazing stuff there. Thank you for talking to us a little bit more about that. Um, but also, I think another part of this is that both books also help readers transform pain into purpose. So, how do you think that that's worked out for you? Have you seen a lot of feedback of other people who have talked to you about being able to transform the pain into the purpose that you're living today?
Yes, one young lady when we did a live, when the Perspectives on Cancer book came out, volume 3, she told me, she's like, I love the line when you gave to your aunt. She's like, what do you want for your victory dinner? Do you want collard greens? Do you want macaroni and cheese? Do you want this? She's like, that gave me a giggle because I could feel how much you loved her enough to make her laugh.
Mm,
And she's like, and you also gave me a perspective of what it's like when you have to sacrifice in a from a different way in order to give somebody what they need. And that touched me because I was like, I thought that this was normal. That if you're, especially for those that have a serving spirit, you sacrifice some things, but you don't sacrifice all of yourself in order to get the job done. So when I heard her say that she loved that part specifically because it made her look at a different perspective, I loved that I wrote it. And for breaking the silence, the thing that got me the most was when I actually got my family to read the first 2 pages. The funny part, my brother thought was hilarious that he was like, "Let me break it down to you. I am a black bisexual female." He thought it was hilarious because he was like, "You never told anybody about that." And I said, "Well, it's because I wasn't ready.
mm,
Nobody needed to know." But that's something that takes a while and growth to do. Those stepping
mm.
stones aren't easy, but they're necessary.
Exactly. And I guess it goes to show that sometimes you might not be in the right place, the right stage of your life to write about something, but when the time does come, it makes it all that better. But perhaps this is a good time for us to transition into the writing process itself then.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about that. Did it require a lot of brainstorming in the beginning or any outlining phases, or did it come purely from the heart?
So it was a combination of both. So the outline, how I did was I had to put what the center topic was. What did I want the spirit of those pages to say? And I had to think about what, in order to help me think about, I had to meditate on what's something that I know that I can personally vouch for that nobody else would be a specialty in. So for me personally, I knew grief. I knew what love was. I knew what setting boundaries meant. I knew what being able to say no even when you're shaking meant. So I was like, what do all these things have in common?
Hmm.
And I said, worthiness. Because sometimes we lead a life of fear because we feel like we're not enough, we're not adequate by the standards of the people that we're around, or even by the standards of societal norms. So I was like, okay, maybe I can talk about that. And then I also thought about what the anchors would be. So I remember in one Bible class long time ago, they talked about being worthy still for God. So I was like, okay, so I can talk about being worthy still in this Breaking the Silence book. That way, and I had to think about like what the concept would be, or what 3 stories that I can put in that help me shape myself into worthy still. So it was kind of like the basic bubble chart. And then after that, it came to be a line chart about the topic that I was talking about. Then I did 3 marks on the different angles that I wanted to approach it. Like
Understood.
the stories that in my life that made me feel in this way. So
Right.
that's one thing you can do. Outlines help a lot than bubbles, but bubbles is where to start.
Exactly. Yeah, so I guess it also depends on, like, if you're a visual planner or if you'd rather
Mhm.
just, like, kind of bullet points. You gotta maybe play around with what works best for you, and clearly you found the process that best allows you to express your feelings, in a positive way and most clearly too.
Yeah, I found out outlines give you more of a detail when it comes down to expressing whatever you want when it comes down to the topic, because it helps you break it down even further. So there's like there's the main topic, subtopics, and mini subtopics to help you connect everything together. So if you're a visual learner, that's something that I encourage you to do, especially if you're a person that's attention to detail. Writing it down in that way will give you some type of insight of what direction you want not only your characters to go, but also to what you want your words to speak on, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
No, it does. Yeah, exactly what the meaning you can be that could be drawn from the words. I get what you're coming from there.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess, of course, the overarching point here to make is that you're not only writing about something that's personal, but also kind of difficult to talk about. So, if you were an author today who has a story to tell, but they're a little bit nervous about the vulnerability required to write it, what would you say? What kind of advice would you give somebody who needs that little bit of bravery in order to put it down on the page the way you have?
I would say in this case, ask yourself, what would your your childhood self would have done if they had somebody just like you? Would
Right.
they have been scared? Would they have been afraid to tell their truth? Like if we think back on an artist like Maya Angelou, she wrote many books, and all of them either talked about her life or it talked about her experience in poetry that uplifted, not only uplifted people, but it uplifted the spirit
Yeah.
of the person that read it. So if you ask yourself, am I brave enough to do it? If I'm not, why am I not brave enough to do it? Then I would say that you have to think about, what if somebody just like you did not write the books that you love? Would you love them less or more?
Right. Yeah, so I guess you have to ask yourself that question, really think about what your younger self would need and how you can help somebody that is in the same footsteps as your younger self really get to where they need to be too. So thank you for sharing that. That's beautiful. But, these are only your first, couple of writings. Something tells me that your mission isn't done yet. You still have a lot to put out there into the world. So is there any upcoming projects or other books or pieces of writing that we could be excited to check out?
So I am in the process of writing a book, about a book of lessons that I've learned in different sections. One thing that I've noticed is that when it comes to writing your own personal book, and again, this is the main key of it, what is the purpose of it, has always rung true in every single piece of writing that I've done. Even when I was in high school and I did poems, what was the feelings that I had when I wrote it? Why was I writing it? Was I writing it out of spite, or was I writing it to release the emotions? You don't realize later on that how healing writing is until you start getting down to the nitty-gritty of the why. So this book is going to talk about like things that I have been through personally, and it's separated in mind, body, and spirit, because
Mm,
whether we know it or not, these three anchors determine a lot about our foundation when it comes to our personal sense of self and our boundaries, how we communicate with others. And I always, like with my clients, I always say your roots determine a lot of the things that you have in life. So when you think about your mind, body, and spirit practices, you have to think about this internally. What does your mind say when things don't go the way you want it to? How does your body react when things shift in a way that's unexpected? And what does your spirit do in that moment to connect with all three? So I think this is going to be an exciting type of writing for me because it'll also help me grow as well.
Absolutely. And I love how you make that distinction between the three different parts. I think that's important to compartmentalize, but also be aware of. So that's exciting. And is there a certain time when that would be released? Are you still working on it?
I'm still working on it. I'm thinking I want to release it in a year, but it could be sooner. You never know. Just if you follow me on my website and everything, www.shadowcornerlifecoaching.com. I'll be doing like updates on whether or not the book is here because I have a section of it that talks about the books that I've write and you can support me that way. Just I think those are I guess those are things that I want the world to hear.
Understood. Okay. Well, there we go. And guys, we're going to put the links to that website and everything else in the description box of this podcast today. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more and staying up to date and supporting the mission, well, go ahead and click on over and do just that. So I'm wondering, as we begin to wrap up today, do you have any other last bits of advice to offer the audience?
So I'm gonna do this as children of all ages. Do not be scared to speak your truth when necessary because it'll be the best defining moment of your life. And always ask yourself, if not you, then who in this moment? Because writers are artists in their own right. And if you're not willing to write your art and letting it die, then you'll never have a say in anything. So write like your life depended on it, but make sure that you do it with honor. Not just the honor of people, but to honor yourself and those layers of yourself that wish they had a voice once upon a time.
Understood. I love that. Yeah. And if not you, then who? I like that little catchphrase too. That's perfect. And thank you so much for sharing that. You're right. I mean, don't hesitate. If you have a story to share, get it out there. Get past that fear, like you mentioned. Think about what your younger self might learn from it too. So, this has been a really insightful podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been very, thank you for being so generous with us, with sharing everything that you've, experienced and been through and all of your writing tips as well. I think it's been very insightful for us. I think we have a lot to learn.
I thank you for allowing me to be here. I didn't even think I would get to this point. Which is also the second reason why I say if not you, then who.
Of course. Yeah, and that's why we have to like just be super mindful about what we're doing, what we're putting out there, and you never know who's going to learn from our stories. So, thank you so much for that. And to our listeners today, if this conversation moved you as well, well, share it with somebody who needs to hear it. Click on the links in the description box, get connected. And other than that, just remember that your story, your shadows, and your survival matters. The world is waiting for the voice that only you can offer. So, get writing today and join the mission. And see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast.
Bye for now.
Okay, well, bye for now. That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.